Good morning, everybody. My name is David Shay. This is my co-presenter, Katie.
Hi.
And we are here from the Urban Department of Rare Books and Special Collections to talk about cataloging AV audiovisual materials in RDA MARC 21. So let me go ahead and stop my video and we'll just head out. All right, so just a quick background on me. I have been a cataloger for about 11 years now at for public libraries, government libraries, academic libraries. I've done a little bit of everything, but for the past almost 6 years now, I have been the head of cataloging for the Urban Department of Rare Books and Special Collections here at the University of South Carolina. My co-presenter.
Yes, so my name is Katie Hoskins. I have been working for David Shay here at the Urban Department at USC for about 2 years now. I started here as an intern, and now I am working with David cataloging tons of different types of materials. And I'm super excited to be co-hosting this presentation today.
Great. So first, I'm going to pop up. Here's some quick resources about cataloging audiovisual materials. One of the best one right here is this first one, OLAC, Online Audiovisual Catalogers Associations, and one of those. I never remember what the OLAC acronym stands for, but they have some really great documentation on best practices for cataloging not just AV materials, but other kinds of materials like 3D materials like board games and equipments that are really, really useful that I like quite a lot. I think the one for AV, the document for AV materials is over 200 pages long, jam-packed full of useful information. It's also the Music Library Association has some great cataloging resources, as well as kind of your standard with the Library of Congress, MARC 21, bibliographic, and OCLC bib formats and standards. So we're going to start out talking today about DVDs and Blu-rays, and by covering this section, and by extension, any kind of visual material. The formats are going to differ. Some of the fields are going to differ a little bit, but really kind of the same general principles and ideas apply to most any kind of video recording. So here is an example of how of one in OCLC. Connection. So this is page 1 of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and yet more of it, and yet more of it. This record contains a ton of information about a ton of things, from your standard fields, and then a variety of technical fields, notes, subject headings, and especially extra 700 fields for people involved in producing a film. So we've got the director, the screenwriters, producers, actors, designers, etc. So in looking for, this is from the perspective that we're doing this, is we're working through Connection, with OCLC Connection, which is primarily what we use, but a lot of these things are going to be in some sort of variation on whatever system you're going to be using. All of the information in these fixed fields, for example, is the OCLC fixed fields are going to show up in your leader field and your 008 field in whatever system you're working on. 008, you can code by hand. I would not recommend it, but it is possible. It's 40 characters long, so, and it starts numbering from 0, so 0 through 39. So that's always a thing that throws people off. Okay, so type, we've got type of material. So yesterday, when we went over things, the type was A for monograph materials. This is type G for projected medium. Our encoding level, blank, or a number of other options. Source D, cataloging source is almost always going to be D, because we are neither, none of us are, a national bibliographical agency putting in these records. We're not Library of Congress. We're not the National Library of Spain, or, the equivalent authority in another country. Our audience field, there's a variety of different ones you can look at that are very well defined in Library of Congress MARC 21 sheets and the OCLC bib formats and standards, where you can encode kind of the appropriate audience level of the material. There's a number of different juvenile and kids age ranges to pick from. There's some adult ones. Type of control is either blank or A for archival. It's really unlikely that you're going to have any A's with this kind of material. Language, this is a 3-letter language code for the primary language of the material. So we've got ENG. Our next line, BLVL, is bibliographic level. M for monograph or item. The only other one you see a lot, the only one that we use a lot, is C for collection, when we want to maintain a group of materials together as an integral thing. Form of item is going to be blank for most videos. GPub is government publication. In this case, we've got blank for no, but there's also options like S for state governments, F for federal governments, I for international organizations, and I think L for local governments. So you might have some kind of video produced by a different level of a government. So runtime is the number of minutes in 3 digits. So this movie is 133 minutes long. MREC is blank. It's an old obsolete field. Country of publication. It's a 2 or 3 letter code. Here we've got CAU for California, United States. Most other countries will only be 2 letters. The only 5-letter countries are for US states, Canadian provinces, Australian provinces, Chinese provinces, and the constituent parts of the United Kingdom. So for example, Scotland is STK for Scotland, United Kingdom. Whereas Italy is, I think, just IT, for example. And they're not always as obvious as they might be. So last line, we've got description I. I for ISBD punctuation, I for RDA, an RDA record. Most of these fixed field things do not necessarily directly correspond to something in RDA. This is all MARC coding. And again, this is all background things that your users are never going to see, but is machine readable. TMAT is type of visual materials. V for video recording. This same basic format is used for other kinds of visual materials, like photographs or pieces of art. Tech, there's 3 options that you're going to want to use here. This is L for live action, A for animation, L for live action, or C for combination. So Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a combination of live action and animation. So in that case, you would use a C. DTST, dates. A lot of films that you'll see will have this P for date of distribution / release. So in these dates here, we've got it was originally released in 2016. The DVD or Blu-ray was distributed in 2017. And you'll also see the kind of the standard S for single date sometimes, well, especially for direct to video release things. All right, our 007 physical description fixed field. So for books, this was just a simple 2 entry. You did A, subfield A and subfield B. For any kind of non-book material, there are going to be a lot of other options, but they're going to be pretty standard. Most of this field is going to be pretty standard for any given video disc. So our subfields are A, which are V for video recording. Subfield B is D for video disc. Subfield D, in this case, is C for multicolored. It would be B for black and white if you had a black and white movie. Subfield E is where it indicates what kind of disc this is on. So here we've got S for Blu-ray. You would put V if it was a DVD. Subfield F here is indication. So we've got A, sound on medium. So I don't know if anyone else remembers those film strips that they used to show in elementary school where the audio was on a tape cassette separately. There would be a different designator for that. So the sound is on the medium, and then G, the sound is on the video disc. Z, this is a holdover from videotape when you had different width videotapes. But any kind of digital field is just going to be Z for other. But if you had VHS cassettes versus beta cassettes versus 16 millimeter film strips, that is going to be different. And your subfield I for in this situation K, more than one sound playback configuration. So there's different kinds of sound setups. You've got different audio languages, most likely, that sort of thing. Cataloging source 040, this is just like your books and audiobooks. You've got your subfield B for English, so that you're cataloging in the English language, and subfield E that you are going to RDA standards. There are different things for other kinds of materials, for example, another kind of encoding systems. So for example, if I was creating a book record and I was using descriptive cataloging for rare materials books, it would be EDCRMB. And you can actually make hybrid records. So I could have ERDA and EDCRMB. Not that really matters for this, because AV materials, you're always going to want to go RDA. 024, other standard number. So with books, 020 ISBN numbers are really important for tracking what you're looking at. In this case, we've got first indicator 1 for a UPC code, universal product code, and here we have that number, which you will usually find somewhere on the disk, on the case for the disk itself. And here we've got a subfield Q for qualifying information. This is the UPC code for a set. 028 publisher number. Your first indicator, in this case, is 4 for video recording number, 2 for no access point. So there is various publisher numbers for Lucasfilm and for the items on there, which again you will usually find on that information somewhere. And again, for all these O2X fields, you can always use subfield Q to supply qualifying information. 041 language code. Just like with books, you want to keep track of the kinds of languages that are available in it. In this case, we've got a first indicator 1 indicating that it includes a translation. There's no second indicator, and then in each of the subfield A's, we've encoded each audio language. So this is in English. It also has French audio and Spanish audio. And then these subfield J's that we've included are the subtitles. So it has subtitles in English, French, and Spanish. And then here we have subfield H for the original language of the movie. So if you had a Japanese movie, I don't know, you would have that was originally in Japanese but had English language subtitles and say an English language dub. You would have your subfield A for Japanese. You would have additional subfield A for English to indicate that it includes audio for each language, and then you would have an additional subfield J for the English subtitles, and your subfield H would be the code for Japanese. Just as an example. 130 main entry uniform title. A lot of motion picture, a lot of movies have a preferred title to necessarily the preferred title on the item to help because titles won't always be necessarily on an item, and a lot of the RDA rules say, hey, what's the item on the title? In this case, we have first indicator 0 for no non-violent characters, no second indicator, and you'll generally have the title of the movie with motion picture in parentheses, or for instances where you have multiple movies with the same title, remakes, you can have : 1975. So for King Kong, parentheses motion picture, and then I don't remember when the 70s remake was made, or the more recent, the 2000s Peter Jackson remake. Both of them, King Kong motion picture : 1970 whatever, and then King Kong parentheses motion picture : 2000 whatever. You also should see these with books too, and treaties, the names of treaties, interestingly enough. 245 title main entry. You're using the same indicators and subfields as you would for a book. Your preferred source of your title is your title screen of your movie, but you can use the titles on the box if you need to. And you're going to have in your statement of responsibility, at the very least, people responsible for directing, producing, writing, and presenting the film. So here you've got directed by Gareth Edwards, screenplay by Chris Weitz and Tony Gilroy, story by these guys, produced by Kathleen Kennedy and these other people, etc. Excuse me. Edition statement. You can use your 250 to describe your edition statement, usually things like special edition or widescreen edition, but you can also use in square brackets something like Blu-ray or DVD to indicate which kind of version it is, just to add another layer of just you can have another piece in the record that allows your user to identify what the format of this material is, maybe a little more easily than some of the others might. 264, publication distribution information. A lot of movies will not necessarily have a publisher listed on them per se, but will instead have a distributor. Your 264 on your books, the second indicator that you generally use is a 1 for a publisher, but again, since we generally have a distributor more often than we have a publisher per se, we've got second indicator 2, and then you enter the subfields just as you would a book: place of distribution, or place of distributor, their name, and then a year. 300 physical description. So here we have no indicators again, and your subfield A is your number of discs with your running time in parentheses. So we've got 2 video discs, an approximate running time of 133 minutes. For subfield B, it has sound, it is in color, and this subfield C, this 3 3/4 inches, is the standard size of Blu-rays, DVDs, and CDs. You can also add your + subfield E to add any additional material that might be that might come with your DVD, like a booklet or a poster or some other kind of material. Your 3XX fields, these are your technical specification fields. So these can be these 3XXs can be used to encode different technical aspects of your AV materials, like aspect ratios and types of videos encoding. You can find a listing of these terms and suffix codes at the RDA registry, which is a pretty useful source for figuring out different kinds of formats and material types. Your 33X fields, generally for any kind of, for a DVD or a Blu-ray, is always going to be these same three: 336 two-dimensional moving image, 337 video, 338 video disc. Now this one, your carrier might be different depending on if you've got a cassette or an actual film strip of some kind. Your 344, your sound characteristics. This is, some of these are a little weird, but this is again the technical information of what's going on in your video. So we have no indicators. Our subfield A is digital. It's always going to be the same for Blu-rays and DVDs. It will be different from for other kinds of film material, like physical film strips or cassette tapes. Your medium of audio encoding is optical, because these were made with a laser and are interpreted by a laser. You've got your playback channels in subfield G, mono, stereo, surround sound. Subfield H, special playback characteristics. So it's got this kind of encoding, these two kinds of audio encodings, and then all this terminology is controlled by RDA vocabulary, and there are other vocabularies out there. Your 346 video characteristics, indicators, and this is used for the format of the video. Here, straight into subfield B, NTSC is the type of video encoding used in North America and Japan. PAL is the broadcast encoding that you'll see in Europe. It's at a slightly different speed, and the colors can be slightly different. And they can be a little different. So it can be so they're not normally compatible, say European and North American broadcast standards. 347 digital file characteristics. It's a video file. Again, this is additional specifications for encoding. So we've got our video file, we've got our format, Blu-ray or DVD, and subfield B. And in subfield E, we have the regions that this is encoded for. So this Blu-ray is encoded for region A, region B, and region C. DVD encodings, North America is region 1, if I remember correctly. So if you end up with, which can cause trouble when used in different kinds of machines, DVD players that you buy in the United States will not read videos that are encoded to different regions, and if you end up with the DVD that is region 0, you are almost certainly dealing with a counterfeit. So ideally, you should probably not be entering DVDs into your catalog that have a region 0 encoding. Now, there may be some exceptions for things that are not feature films and what have you. But if you have a feature film that has a region encoding of 0, it is almost certainly a counterfeit and should not be entered into your catalog. 830 or 380 form of work, in this case motion picture. You can use this, you can actually use this field with different kinds of any kind of different record to differentiate it from the different things. So you could in theory, if you wanted to, have 380 in the book of To Kill a Mockingbird, and then a 380 in the DVD for the Gregory Peck movie version, To Kill a Mockingbird, with motion picture in it. You could, in theory, if you had a recording of an opera that's based on To Kill a Mockingbird, you could have that, or a recording of a play, etc. This is just another way of helping you distinguish from adapted materials, especially. So, especially when you have books that have been made into movies, or interestingly, or novelizations of a movie, which I feel like are a lot less common nowadays. All right. Like anything, there are lots of different kinds of note fields that can apply specifically. So this is basically this 538. This is a bit more plain text kind of note about the same kinds of things that are in things like the 344. You're adding, again, technical information about the item. It's Blu-ray, it's in these regions, it has this audio standard, and it requires a Blu-ray player. So this is also where you want to enter into this field anytime where you need a specific software or a specific piece of equipment to use this item. If you were cataloging video games, you would want to have, requires, whatever video game console that it would use, or whatever PC kind of console information that you might need for software. 546 language notes. This is your text version of your 041 field, because no one's seeing your 041 language field. That's all, background machine readable stuff. This is the note field where people are actually going to see the information about the languages in the material. So we've got English encoded into this audio standard. You've got Spanish or French in this standard, and then you've got dialogue mentioning that. You've got French or Spanish subtitles, and you've also got English subtitles, and you've also got a descriptive video track. So those are really neat for the visually impaired. It's an additional audio track that's describing what's happening in the film as it's going on. Your 511 performer note. Here is where you can add in plain text and keyword searchable your primary cast members. In this case, we've got a 1, first indicator of 1 for cast. And then we've got the major characters in the movie, major actors. The 508 is the kind of equivalent of the 511, but for creation and production, non-cast members who are involved in this. So we've got music, visual effects, costume design, production design, director of photography. Again, you can have a lot of general notes that are potentially available. So in this case, we've got a note about originally released as a motion picture in 2016, based on characters created by George Lucas. We've got originally released as part of a DVD Blu-ray combo pack. And then we've got an aspect ratio, a widescreen aspect ratio. And again, this is 500 fields are just for kind of anything that you think is important about an item, but that doesn't necessarily fit into another field. 521 target audience note. This is first indicator 8. This is where you're going to want to add any kind of age rating to a book. So to a book, a movie, pretty much anything you want. So we've got the PG-13 rating and the description of why it's rated PG-13. And I'm actually going to take a couple steps backwards, kind of all the way back to the beginning a little bit, to look at these 700 fields. So with any kind of video, you are very likely going to have a lot of people involved in this, especially for a big blockbuster movie where, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars may be spent to make this film. So we can, using 700 fields, add each of these persons' names, searchable under, you know, an author or a name search, with relator terms that describe who, what this person's role is in making this movie. A good rule of thumb is you want your director, you want your screenwriters, your producers, and your major actors. There are a lot of other potential people you might have in here. So this one, we've got production designers, we've got director of photography, we've got editors, we've got composers. Really, the sort of guideline is use cataloger's best judgment. Be thinking about what your patrons are going to be looking for, what is going to be useful for them. Because ideally, everything that you include in this record is there to be useful for your patron in some way. It's going to provide them the way that they're going to be able to find this thing in your catalog. So there's no hard rule in how many people you should add. You could, in theory, go on forever. But what is it that's going to be useful to your patron, and what is the best use of your limited time while cataloging these materials? So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to Katie, so she can talk about audiobooks and music.
All right, hello everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. If you were here yesterday, and if you weren't here yesterday, hello. My name's Katie, and so I'm going to follow up with what David said with the guides for cataloging audio recordings. So instead of video recordings, we're talking about audio recordings now. And let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right. Can you just give me a verbal confirmation that you can see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to jump back and forth, I think, between the presentation and then the RDA toolkit as well. But if it gets too burdensome, if there's too much lag, please stop me and let me know. And also, David, jump in with any examples you have. I know you always have a lot of fun examples. Okay.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, people will get a unusually good glimpse at my musical tastes accidentally.
All right. So on this first slide, and so actually first let me just talk a little bit about audio recordings and what you see here. So this is in connection, like David said, and for sound recordings, we use the same work form, whether it is a musical recording or a spoken word recording. There is a separate work form in connection, meaning we have, separate fixed fields, things that go in your MARC leader or 008 field for musical scores. So we're not going to talk about musical scores today. But with that being said, the guidelines that we combine with RDA to follow the best practices for recording audio recordings, the Music Library Association best practices, also include guidelines for cataloging scores. Those are mixed in. So I'm going to jump over to the Music Library Association best practices, which are available in the RDA toolkit. And you will see what I'm talking about. So go here, over to the internet. Let me see. First, I have to see. What's annoying to me is that this little, your sharing always goes at the top. David, do you remember how to like move it to the bottom? Let me see.
Not really, no.
All right, well, that's okay. Maybe I can like reach in here and grab these different tabs. Okay, so best practices I have over here. They also have supplements to the best practices that are available as PDFs on the Music Library Association website, which David has linked for you at the beginning of this presentation. But the actual guidelines are available in the RDA toolkit. And it looks like it signed me out, so I'll just refresh the page. Okay, so we're gonna look at the original toolkit first. And then I'll show you exactly what's going on with these guidelines in the new toolkit. Okay, so they are viewable within the RDA table of contents when you go to a certain guideline. Let me show you that quickly. So they're linked, just trying to find a random one, in a little box that will say MLA. Anyway, but then you also have them in resources down here, the Music Library Association best practices, and you get a table of contents for that as well. And what's really helpful is these link to the RDA standard that they're talking about. Okay, but like I said, for notated music, this is also combined in their guidelines. If we go back to the original toolkit, under policies is where the Music Library Association best practices is located. There we go. You can see it's not complete. We only have one that's been transferred over so far. And so when you're in an actual, let's go to a random one here. When you're in an actual, section for an element or specific guidance, you can, let me actually do this. Let me go to a specific element. See where it says select policy statement set. This is the way that you can view these statements in the new toolkit. You select which policy statement set you want to view, and it will intersperse it with the standard in RDA. Okay, we did not talk about that yesterday, so hopefully that's helpful if you are still learning like I am to navigate in the new toolkit. Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, so this is an example of an audiobook record, just a very typical one. So you'll see some different fixed fields at the top, first of all, from what you're used to seeing with books. And we will go through these one at a time as well. There are some ones that are specific to audio recordings and that have specific guidelines that you need to follow for those. Some other things you might notice, get my mouse here. Let's see, we have here, it's a little bit small, so I'll zoom in. A phonogram copyright date or phonogram copyright date. This is something that's common with musical recordings. And so we'll talk about that in detail a little bit later. You'll also notice that this looks a little bit different from the physical description for a book. You have the number of audio discs, duration, some characteristics of the carrier, and then the measurement is a little bit different. Let's see. Here's the continuation of that audiobook record. Okay, so we're not going to talk about the subjects today for audio recordings, since that is out of scope for RDA anyway. But these should be the same for the print version of the book when you have an audiobook that you're cataloging. Okay, and then down here you'll see in the 655 for the genre or form, we also get an audiobooks form from the Thesaurus Library of Congress genre and form terms. Okay, so those are just some specific things that might stand out to you right away. Okay, so now we have an example of a record for music. Again, the fixed fields are the same for any sound recordings, but we will enter different options there. Okay, the 518 is one that might stand out right away as not being typical. So this is the date and place of capture, and this is based in RDA. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, here's the continuation of that record. And we'll just jump in to going line by line. Okay. All right, so we'll start off with our fixed fields like we did for all of the other formats so far. And it's very much the same for many of them. So for type, we get this with all of our different formats. But for audiobooks, we're going to include the option I, the code I, for a non-musical sound recording. This can also be for sound recordings with incidental music. So something where someone is speaking, but there's music maybe softly in the background, or even things like bird calls maybe, or the sounds of the ocean, anything that's not predominantly music, where music is not the primary focus of the recording. But if music is the primary focus, then we'll use code J for a musical sound recording.
Yeah, a good example of that particular thing is that many years ago, there was a full cast audiobook version of The Lord of the Rings that was done, and they do actually, I think, sing the songs that pop up in the course of the storytelling. So, but it is primarily a non-musical sound recording, though.
Yeah, thanks, David. Okay, so for the encoding level, you can see it's I here, but that is actually the OCLC code for full level, and so now we're transitioning over to blank for full level. So that's something that's changed just recently. I is still acceptable, but OCLC, just so you know, we'll be making that change. Okay, source. David, I think, has explained this really well, that you'll usually have D. You can, see records if you're copy cataloging and you're going to use a record that Library of Congress has made, then it will be different. But if you were originally cataloging something, or if you're using a record that, another institution has created, it will usually be B. Okay. Audience, the target audience, again, blank if unknown or unspecified, E for adults. For music, this can be the audience that is intended to listen to the music. I think it's interesting for musical scores. It can also be who is intended to perform the music. But again, we're not really talking about scores today. Type of control, it's like this, and it will almost always be blank now. So the language code is an important one. As you saw with video recordings, you can have a lot of different languages included in a single resource with subtitles. So for audio recordings, you may also get the same situation. And beyond that, you can also have on the container things in different languages, or the text of a musical program, or the lyrics of a song, or maybe the words that are spoken. So these are things that you want to take into consideration. The main primary language of the recording will go right here in your language fixed field. But you can record a lot more detail in the 041 field in your MARC record, in the body of your MARC record. So I'm going to show that as well. Okay, so this is the 041 language code, and this is from OCLC bib formats. You have a lot of different options here for subfields that you can use for different aspects of your resource. So a summary or abstract, the sung or spoken text is usually the one that you will see for this type of recording in an 041 field. And then also the language code of librettos, if you have the text of what is spoken or what is sung, will be in a subfield E. If it's a translation, you'll also get into subfields for language code of the original. So those are things that are common with audio recordings. Like with other types of materials, you can also include a 546 language note to make this more clear to the users what exactly is in what language. All right, so move on to the next slide. And quickly, I just wanted to say to remember that these fixed fields, you will not see them like this in the MARC format when you're not in something like Connection, or if you have a different metadata editor that you're using. But I think David also has said that as well. So, okay, so B level, the bibliographic level, we're using M for monograph, not a collection. This is a monograph, it's not a serial, anything like that. The form of the item is going to be blank for audiobooks and music. Composition, the form of composition, we can record in for not music, but there are so many other codes that you can use for different types of music. The example you see here, which is RC, and oh, let me actually say, this top line is from the example record for an audiobook. And this bottom line is for an example from, is a line from the example for a musical recording. Okay. So there are so many other codes for other types of music. RC, the one that you see on the slide here, is for rock music. But there are a lot more. Okay, and that's a list that comes from MARC. All right, so accompanying matter. What kind of materials are with the recording? And when you have sound recordings, you often have a lot of accompanying material. Things might be inserted in the case, whatever. You might have a lot of text on the container itself. So with this, you can include codes for the text, for biography of a composer or performer, a music score if you have an audio recording that comes with the score for the music that's performed, all of that. So you can also add a 500 note to describe those in more detail as well. So you might have a 500 note for liner notes include whatever, or program notes on container, that sort of thing. Another thing to keep in mind for audio recordings is that they are often issued with multiple pieces. So you can have an audio disc with a booklet, and something that's really important is to describe or to decide what is the main part of this resource, and that is going to guide you for describing that item. You can take identifying information from anywhere, but your primary source will be the main part. And so this guide is for when you've decided that the audio recording is the main part. You can treat a booklet as accompanying material if it's something that's inserted in the case. If it's a booklet that's visible through the container, like you see with CDs a lot of times, that's considered part of the container. So that will be important when you are transcribing elements. A permanently affixed label, though, for audio recordings is generally considered your primary source of information. If you have multiple parts, so multiple discs perhaps, then you'll turn to the container. All right, so moving on this slide though. MREC, modified record, like David said, this is blank for most books. You're gonna leave it blank for most things actually. Country of publication is your code that comes from the 264 subfield A, so the place of location, the place of publication, excuse me. And I think David explained this very well also. Okay, so part. This is something that is specific to notated music or a music score. So for audio recordings, we're going to use code in for no. Transposition and arrangement. Has the work been transposed to a different pitch, or is it an arrangement of another piece of music? Again, this is specific to notated music. So we will, in this case, use code in for not notated music. And if you do have additional parts to your resource that are anything other than in, so if you have something that is notated music included in your resource, you can always add notes about that, the actual, what the transposition or arrangement is in a 500 general note. So our last line of fixed fields for audiobooks and music. The descriptive cataloging form is always going to be I in combination with RDA in your 040 field. You can also use C if you are opting to omit punctuation, if you're going for a minimally punctuated record. Okay, the format of the music. You're going to use code in if this is not printed music again. So the same situation as we saw on the previous slide. Let me see. So L text or literary text for sound recordings. So it might be code F fiction if you have an audiobook. These are things that you would include for spoken word recordings. You might have O for folk tales, for example. If you have a recording of just sounds, you can use code S for sounds. And again, there are a variety of codes that you can use here. Okay, DTST, this is the same, the type of date, this is the same for other monographic type materials. So you can use code T if you have both a copyright date and a publication date. R for a reprint or a re-release, possibly, and S for single, which of course is usually most common. If you need to use date 1 and 2, you're going to have the first date for the publication date, second date for copyright date if you're using the date type T, or R for reprint, you'll have the most recent date first, and then the earlier date second. All right, then just like with video recordings, we have a whole slew of codes that we need to include to really get down into a more nitty-gritty physical description, describing what is this thing. There are a lot of them, and I don't think this was said before, but in these subfield codes, so subfield B, D, E, F here, these are an OCLC thing. They're just included for readability, believe it or not. But in most systems, I would say you're not going to have something like that. You might be able to open up the field and edit it, and it'll appear more like the fixed fields did, where you have a short description of what you're actually supposed to be entering in. But this is the way that OCLC does it in Connection. Okay, so subfield A is for the category of the material. S you'll use for sound recording. Subfield B is for the specific material designation. So D for sound disk. And of course, there are other options for all of these. And we'll actually look at the OCLC bit formats page to look at a few of those. Okay, subfield D is for the speed. F you're going to use if you have a CD. You might have different speeds for things like vinyl records. That's going to be important because it matters, you know, what type of device you're going to play it on. Okay, E is configuration of playback channels. S is for stereo sound. You might also have M for mono. If this is not specified anywhere on your resource and you don't know, you can also say that. That's always safer than making a guess. If you're using a record that's already been created, keep in mind though that you will have separate bib records for different formats here. So there will be a separate record for a stereo version versus a mono version if both of those exist. Subfield F is for the groove width. If you have something like a CD, you're going to use in for not applicable. G is for dimensions. So you're also going to use the code G for a standard CD. Subfield H is tape width. If you don't have something that is a tape recording, you'll use code in. Same for I, if you don't have a tape, you'll use code in, and that is for tape configuration. Subfield J, the kind of disc, cylinder, or tape. You'll have code M for mass produced, and the note here is as opposed to a master. And if you're like me, you may not have known what that meant until the whole fiasco with Taylor Swift losing the control of her masters. My little sister is a huge Taylor Swift fan and filled me in on that. And that's also another thing about cataloging these audio recordings. You don't have to be an expert on sound recordings to be able to follow the instructions here. So OCLC bib formats includes a lot of helpful guidance there. All right, so moving on, subfield K is for the kind of material, M is plastic. Subfield L is for the kind of cutting. So the way that the grooves are cut, you'll use code N for not applicable. You might use this with vinyl records. Subfield M is for special playback characteristics. E you'll use for digital recording. You can also use codes for unknown or none are available. And then the last subfield in is for capture and storage techniques. And if you have a CD, you'll use code D here for digital storage. Okay, so I know that was a lot, but we're going to jump over to OCLC and hopefully it looks a little bit clearer. All right, and this is for 007. So in the OCLC bib formats, you have a different 007 page for each material. We're going to look at the one for sound recording. Okay, these are all listed here for you, what they stand for, the actual names of those codes, subfields. All right, so this is what I was talking about, where OCLC makes it easy for people who aren't necessarily experts to use these codes. So we have different sections for things like analog discs. You know, they'll tell you what's the most common, and I think that's very, very helpful. Bear with me while I scroll all the way down here. But here are all of the different codes that you can use, and this is available in MARC 21 bibliographic as well from Library of Congress. But you know, you have each option laid out here with a description, which is very, very nice. Okay, this is also where the first supplement to the Music Library Association best practices comes in. I'll grab it here. Okay. So let me see. So this is for, you know, the characteristics of, ooh, actually I may have written an incorrect note to myself. So this is probably not where we want to use this supplement. I have it at the wrong spot here. That's okay. Bear with me for just a moment. Oh, here's supplement 1. I'm so sorry. Okay, so here's supplement 1, guidelines for describing and encoding attributes of audio recording carriers. This is a huge table that is kind of like a cheat sheet that you can use for different formats. It tells you what's most common, the most common codes that you will use for filling in each of these different characteristics. And it's just kind of fun to look at all of the different kinds of audio recordings that you can have. All of these different things that can carry audio that you might come across. Even a CD-ROM, an audio cassette. Okay. So let's go back to the PowerPoint here and we'll move on. Okay, so identifiers, again, are going to be a little bit different for audio recordings. So for an 024, first indicator 2 is going to be an international standard music number. This one that you have in the example here is a universal product code, I believe. 028 is the one that you will see very commonly that you need to include with audio recordings. This is going to be a publisher number here, also known as an issue number, and you'll include a subfield B for that publisher for the name. You can also include a subfield Q like you do for other identifiers. This might be set or disc 1, disc 2. There are a lot of rules that you need to follow for the input for this as well. Like if you have a group of things that is a whole range of numbers, including them in one field is possible. But if you have, you know, jumps from one number to another number, there are different guidelines for that. All right, so your 100 author main entry, and then also a relationship designator in subfield E. Something that's specific to audiobooks that you might find is when an author is also a narrator. And you can add an additional subfield E for narrator. And you do that by just adding a comma and adding an additional subfield E. And then 110 is going to be how you enter corporate author entries for musical groups. So like in the example here, yes. And these names are coming from the Library of Congress and NACO, Name Authority File. So this can be a little bit tricky when you're dealing with audio recordings and RDA, because the responsibility must go beyond actual just performance to be considered a creator under RDA. We'll talk about that a little bit more also with the next slide. But RDA provides lists of relationship designators for agents associated with each WEMI entity, if you remember that from yesterday. Okay, now we have the title proper or title main entry, depending on the situation. So you enter this just the way that you would with a book, but remember the preferred source is going to be a label permanently affixed to the resource. You can also look elsewhere if there is no title on a label, for instance, or if that's not something that applies to whatever form you're working with. And also you can look at the container or possibly even accompanying material, a booklet. But if it's something with multiple parts, like multiple discs, you want to use the container if it's all in one, or the first part that you have. Okay. Something that MLA specifies, the Music Library Association, is that you need to include a note on the source of your title. And this is something that you should do even if it's from that preferred source, because it can vary so widely with this type of material. So you might include a 500 that says title from disc label or title from container. And then another thing that I'll say is that titles for musical works can get a little bit tricky, especially if you're deriving a title for a musical work, including the type of composition. We won't go into that today, but just keep that in mind. Okay. So like I was saying about the responsibility, that also comes into play with your statement of responsibility in the 245 field. So you don't want to include here people who perform, narrate, or contribute in some other way, but don't actually compose the thing or aren't considered a creator of the thing. The exception, though, is that if the performer is the prominent person displayed is more prominent than a composer, for instance, you can list them in a statement of responsibility. This does not apply, however, for an author main entry. So there's that. MLA also says that you can transcribe a statement of responsibility from any source in the resource without brackets. So as long as you're taking it from somewhere on the resource itself, you can include it in the statement of responsibility, even if it's not coming from the same source as your title proper. You'll just want to list them after those that are found from the same source as your title proper. And then also here on the slide, we have do not enter subfield H, the material designator. These are obsolete in RDA. So if you come across this, you can just delete it because that information is going to be included elsewhere. For addition, you would enter it the same way as you would for other materials. Abridged and unabridged could be common with audiobooks, and those are considered addition statements. For your publication information, This again is a transcribed field. Each element is transcribed from the resource as you see it. The container again can be used as a source of information, but if it is coming from outside the resource, we need to use brackets. And something that's to keep an eye out for is that each element is going to have brackets of its own. You can't put the whole field or multiple fields in a single set of brackets. Okay. So something that MLA also provides guidance for, specifically for audio recordings, is that it can get kind of tricky with publisher names. You can also find trade names or brand names or a label company that's listed on your item. So we're going to actually jump over to that guidance right now, because I think they provide some really good examples. Okay. And this will be here. Okay. Bear with me just a moment while I navigate to that. Right. And it is the publisher's name that we're looking for. Okay. So this is the recommendation right here. Treat a trade name or a brand name used by a publishing company, sometimes called a label, as a publisher's name. So London, for instance. So sometimes though, you will find things that you're not sure if it's, the label or the publisher's name, or maybe a series. And so MLA's guidance is if a trade name appears to be the name of a series rather than a publishing subdivision, you can give it a series title. And always, this is something that you should always do, consult the name authority file to see if it's been established as a series name or as a publisher. So you can treat it as a series title in case of doubt. All right. So now we're actually going to look at another piece of guidance from MLA. And this is about the copyright date, which is also included in the 264 field, but in a separate field with subfield 4. So this piece of guidance is for notated music, but we'll scroll down a little bit. No matter what the audio recording is, MLA recommends that you include a copyright date. Whether you're using it to infer your publication date or not, you need to include it. And you can include the latest one that's on the resource. The phonogram date, the one that looks like a P in a circle rather than a C, you can use either, but use the latest one. And keep in mind that that copyright date is going to be for the recording, not the content. They also show examples where you can include more than one if you think that's important for your users to know or important for identification. All right, so physical description. So we have a lot of 3XX fields that will be involved also in describing what your carrier is. So for subfield A, you can include the number of discs and then a duration. If that's included on the container or not too hard to calculate really quickly, you include that in parentheses after the number of discs or whatever type of material you have. You're going to include the total duration here generally. This can also be encoded in a 306 field. This isn't included in our example, but that's something that you can do as well, and actually MLA recommends it. And then if you have multiple tracks or whatever in your audio recording, you can break those down in the table of contents All right, so subfield B, where we see here it says digital, is actually optional for sound recordings. It's going to be preferred to include this information in the other 3XX fields like 344, for instance. So now subfield C for our dimensions. You'll notice that this is different from books because we're measuring not the container here, but the disc itself in the case of audio discs. And so 4 3/4 inches is going to be the standard measurement for CDs, but there are different options here for different size discs that you may come across. And it's kind of funny that inches is going to have a period. It's abbreviated with a period. This is one of the very few times in RDA where abbreviations are used. Most of the time you want to avoid using abbreviations and spell everything out if we're not transcribing it. The same with the duration. You can see that hours there is abbreviated. You'll do the same with minutes and seconds if you include those. All right, so moving on to the other 3XX fields. You can repeat actually all of these if you have more than one carrier type. And like we said before, that happens a lot with audio recordings. And you can see in MLA, they have a lot of examples of that as well, of these multiple fields being repeated. Okay, so 336 is the RDA content. Spoken word is what you want for an audiobook. Performed music is what you want if you have a music recording. 337 for the media. You're going to use audio for audio recordings, and 338 generally audio disc is what you'll want. 344. This is the sound characteristics. So MLA recommends that you use a separate field actually for each unique term. And some of these have vocabularies coming from RDA, but others do not. So you'll definitely want to use a separate field for each unique term if these are coming from separate vocabularies, because you'll need to include a separate subfield 2 for the source of that term. 347, excuse me, is digital file characteristics. Let's see. So audio file is generally what you want. This is another place where RDA may or may not have a list of terms available. And again, you can use separate fields as well. Okay, let me jump over to that supplement that I showed before by mistake. This one. So these are the guidelines, the best practices for using Library of Congress subject headings together with I cannot remember what, Library of Congress medium of performance, the thesaurus for music is what this abbreviation is. So these are things that you can include in a 382 field in your MARC record to talk about the medium of performance. These are very, very specific. There are hundreds of them. You can include that if you feel that is necessary. But Library of Congress genre form terms also has terms that talk about, a type of music, a medium of performance. And the recommendation here is that, let's see. So basically you include both. You can have a 382 and a 655 with that Library of Congress genre form term coexisting. And this one, the Library of Congress genre form term, is going to be less granular most of the time, but not always. Okay. So 505 is your formatted contents note. This is where I talked about you can break down the duration of separate tracks. So if you have maybe different discs or separate tracks, you can include the duration here for each of them. If it's not too burdensome, if you don't have too many to record, as you know, is always the case with a contents note. The first indicator is going to be 0 for saying that you're recording contents, of course. Second indicator, blank for basic, and then 0 for enhanced if you're using those subfields that we talked about yesterday to break down what's title information, what's extra information, what's a statement of responsibility, and so forth. So you can have a separate part of your table of contents for the different track titles and creators, and you're going to separate them with a slash, just like you do in a 245 field. Separate creators are going to be separated with a colon if they worked on that same title. And then you're going to separate tracks or discs, whatever your main part is here that you're dealing with a dash. So space, dash, space for those. So 508, we talked about this a little bit with the video recordings as well. So these are non-cast members of the production. This is not something that you have to transcribe. You want to record this in just whatever brief, succinct way that you can to get the point across. But you can transcribe it if you choose, if it's already in a good presentation on the item, and often I will do that. But you don't have any indicators here, and you're going to separate roles, so producer from whatever else, with a semicolon, and then end with a period like you do with other notes. All right, 511 is performer notes. For audiobooks, this is where you'll list your narrator. So we have here read by Kate Redding and Michael Kramer. You can use the first indicator 0 for performers instead of 1 for cast, but 1 is for cast if that's something that you have, like a recording of a play or whatever. Okay. So 700 fields for your added authors. We're going to include added entries for all of the other people that worked on this item who aren't a creator. Just the same as you would with any other type of material. So narrators get an entry here, and then also band members from the example we have with the band Yes, all have their own entry here, and the role that they play is also included. And you can repeat these for however many people you have. All right, and then series statement. This is something just really quick to take note of. With audio recordings, you can differentiate those from the print version of the same series with a subfield S for spoken word or whatever the different format is. And that is all we have for you today for about audio recordings. And so now I will, if I can stop sharing my screen. Come back to just the meeting here. So thank you for sticking through all that. I know it's a ton of information to take in all at once.
And thanks everybody for coming out and listening to us, and hope it proves helpful with your cataloging.
Quick question.
Sure.
Could you and Katie provide the links and PowerPoints to people who would want it?
We're already on it.
Thank you very much.
This is Christy from the State Library, and Tiffany's going to send the slides and with those links out after the presentation.
Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions? Thank you both for presenting today. We really appreciate it.
This is our
and
pleasure,
thank you all
right?
for attending.
Yeah, thanks everybody for showing up and letting us talk about cataloging. So.
All right, if nobody has any other questions, you'll be seeing that stuff in your inbox soon. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.